So once again, thank you very much for joining, and good afternoon and good morning, good evening from wherever you're watching from, you are connecting from rather. My name is Revelation. I'm the DevOps engineer at Ubuntu Net Alliance for Research and Education Networking of Eastern Southern African NRENs. I'll be today's moderator of this session. And our today's webinar is titled Building Africa's Trusted Research Infrastructure and Taking Fragmented Repositories to Connected Research with DOCiD. Now, today we'll explore how persistent identifier infrastructure can connect repositories, researchers, research output, datasets, projects, and institutions to help make African scholarship more visible, as well as trusted, interoperable, and reusable. But before we begin, I would like to mention of a few housekeeping notes that we have to keep in mind. And this is that today's session will run for not more than 60 minutes. And you feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A or chat as Joy will be presenting. And we'll try as much as possible to address each one of them during our Q&A segment right at the end of this webinar. And just for your information, this session is being recorded, and therefore you should be able to get a recording posted at the Ubuntu Net TV by the end of the recording. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, our today's speaker, Joy Owango. So Joy is the Executive Director of the Training Center in Communication, TCC Africa, and co-lead of the Africa PID Alliance. She has extensive experience supporting African researchers and institutions in scholarly communication, research visibility, and persistent identifiers. Without further ado, I would like to make welcome Joy to the OPAR webinar series. The floor is yours, Joy. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Revelation, and thank you everybody for making it to today's webinar. As Revelation said, I am the Executive Director of the Training Center in Communication and the project lead of the Africa PID Alliance, which is the open infrastructure program of TCC Africa. It's actually the flagship of our open infrastructure focal area. And the Africa PID Alliance strives to create an African-originated, trusted research infrastructure in the form of a persistent identifier. And beyond that, also it involves capacity building on data management for librarians. Because we noticed that the biggest problem when it comes to the visibility of African research is not how research or whether we do research, it's how we store research, how we make our research more visible and shareable. And one of the biggest problems we noted is that we do not have our own type of infrastructure in the form of a persistent identifier, especially when you're looking at elements of sovereignty. And also if you're looking at producing an identifier with a global south lens. And in no way, what we've created, the DOCiD, is in competition with existing persistent identifiers. It is pretty much taking over identifiers. It is pretty much taking over aspects that our existing identifiers have ignored or missed out. And I'll take you through what that means and how that works. And most importantly, how it is able to connect with multiple repositories and put them in a streamlined ecosystem where you can have a streamlined ecosystem with all your research output, whether it is gray literature or primary literature, in one system. And most importantly is that turning the whole ecosystem into a persistent identifier. Now, the question is, how is that possible? I'll take you through that as well. And then another thing we also noted is that there are different types of institutional identifiers, national identifiers, which are normally ignored by the existing PID ecosystem. So we've included those as well, because there's a reason why some of the institutions have these existing identifiers. The only difference is that they are not fair. So we have tried to make them fair and make them more accessible. So what I'll take you through is how we can build Africa's trusted research infrastructure from the various fragmented repositories that we have within our institutions and connect them into one seamless ecosystem through DOCiD. As I said, DOCiD is a persistent identifier. So when we set up the Africa PID Alliance, we noticed that research was fragmented, especially in the social sciences. And we also noted that we are not seeing enough, there was no way we could connect in research, there's no way we could connect research output with collections, whether it is primary collections or secondary collections. When I talk about primary and secondary, it's primary looking at publications, data sets, and secondary is if you produced posters, PowerPoint presentations, lessons, thesis. There was no way we could connect that to the actual collection itself. So let me just give context. So when you look at a library, they have various repositories. So in the case of social sciences, they tend to have special collections, which is used for social science research. And it is not easy, even for a librarian, to connect the special collections with actual research output. So that is where we are seeing the problem. So connecting research output like scientific work, theses, and any gray literature that came out of it, it's not easy to connect the two, yet they're within the same library. So you'll find a situation whereby a university has multiple repositories, different type of repositories, data repository, different types of even content repositories, and you cannot connect them with the actual original collection. So when we started, we saw this problem within the social sciences and cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge. But now we are seeing it's a bigger problem. It's just not a subject-specific problem, it's an archival problem. So as much as we are championing for the preservation and promotion of global indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage, to help scientists and inventors transform their research and innovations into impactful realities, what we are seeing more is improving archival processes within the library with the support of DOCiD. So this project, when we were creating the DOCiD, which is a short form for the Digital Object Container Identifier, and I'll explain to you why it is a container and how it works as a container. When we were creating it within the Africa PID Alliance, we realized this is not a project that we can create in isolation. So as you can see, these are our launching African partners. And Ubuntu Alliance is now become our primary data center. So another thing, when you're creating some of these identifiers, you want your data to stay home. So we've done it in such a manner that the data and metadata stays home. So it is easy to say, yes, you'll have your metadata in AWS, but at the end of the day, you want your data home. So through the Ubuntu Alliance, our metadata is stored in country or in continent. And if there are any countries that want to use the respective endpoints, we can also store it there. But primarily, it is stored at the Ubuntu Alliance as its primary data center. I'll share with you also where the secondary data center is. As you can see, the other partners are the African Library Information Associations and institutions. As I earlier said, when we were setting up the Africa PID Alliance, it wasn't just about the infrastructure issue. It was about a data management issue. So working with AFLIA has been very instrumental in our data management courses. And when we launched our first workshop, our first Moodle, we had over 800 registered participants from over 21 countries. And we're also working with the Africa Academy of Sciences and the Association of African Universities. As you can see, TCC, AOSP, and the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, that is where the State Department of Cultural Heritage in Kenya sits, are our community engagement drivers. Now, this project is not only co-owned from a governance perspective, is not only co-owned by the African stakeholders, but as you can see, it is co-owned by all the FAIR infrastructure stakeholders globally. So you're looking at the Donor Foundation, which is the umbrella body for all persistent identifiers, literally all of them. The Corporation of National Research and Initiatives, that is CNRI, that is where the handle is stored, and the DOCiD is a handle. So they helped us create it and turn it into a super handle, meaning the handle can now accommodate different types of persistent identifiers. So when we were creating the DOCiD, we worked closely with CNRI on this. Donor Foundation guided us on the governance of it. We are also members of the DOI Foundation. As I said, we are not competing with existing persistent identifiers. We are taking over where the existing persistent identifiers have failed to accommodate. So, and also DataCite and Crossref and ORCID ID. So all this, you'll see how it looks like within the ecosystem and how it supports the library and the various use cases we are working with. So this is the front-facing look of the DOCiD. And when we began, we intentionally used all the African Union integrated languages. And as time went by, we went a few steps ahead and we integrated all the major integrated languages of the respective unions. So the EU integrated languages were also included. The African Union integrated languages are included, as I'd mentioned. The Asian integrated languages are also, common integrated languages have also been included as well. Now, the reason for this, it goes to show that, first of all, we are debunking that English is the language of science, because you'll have countries that speak in their national language, which would be considered indigenous language. So like in the case of Malay, you'll find it in Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, and Singapore. If you're looking at Chinese, you'll find it in Singapore, you'll find it in China. So we felt that it was important to have languages that are integration languages included within our ecosystem, but that goes to show is that we can add as many languages as possible. Now, when I say that the DOCiD is a super handle, first of all, let's look at it for what it is. It is a handle. But what makes it different from existing handles is that a handle cannot accommodate any other persistent identifier. But when we worked with CNRI, we were able to splice the existing handle and accommodate different persistent identifiers. At the moment, it can accommodate ACK keys, ROA, different types of DOIs, RRID, and there's even more than this, which I'll share with you. And because of that, you can have a primary collection assigned to a DOCiD, and every single output that came out of that primary collection, whether it is a publication, a data set, a journal article, presentation with a conference proceedings, any type of Braille literatures, illustration and projects, can be assigned their respective persistent identifiers. Not all of them will have DOIs, but they will certainly be made fair by being assigned persistent identifiers to make them accessible. So when somebody cites or pulls out a DOCiD, you just don't pull out only the collection where it was assigned to, but you also pull out every single research output that corresponded and came out of it, complete with their respective identifiers. Now, one of the developments we've done is that the DOCiD, as I'd said earlier on, is a handle. It's a super handle, and it is resolvable via handle.net. So you can get all the information. You can, if you're worried about its resolvability, so it does ensuring its reliable access to metadata across global infrastructures. Then how we made it, it is going to be a bit technical, but feel free to ask questions. Okay, so how we created the DOCiD, we used Invenio. For context, Invenio is the system that was used to create Zenodo. So we've used Invenio. So we are not creating anything new. We are just building on existing infrastructure. So Invenio is the research data management system and is also the user interface. As I said, Invenio is being used by Zenodo. So why wasn't Zenodo able to do this? Zenodo is not able to assign persistent identifiers to multiple objects. You can put a lot of information in Zenodo, but it will be assigned to one identifier, and that is DataCite. So what we've done is a step above that. You can assign persistent identifiers to the multiple objects, thus making them more accessible and more fair. The digital object management is being created via CODRA. CODRA comes from the CNRI, as I'd mentioned earlier, and that is where we also have our secondary metadata storage. We wanted to provide perpetuity. So for us to create perpetuity is that we have the primary data center metadata storage at the Ubuntu Alliance, where it's also our data center, and our secondary metadata storage is at CODRA, which is owned by CNRI. So that provides absolute perpetuity. You're never going to lose your metadata as well at all. One of the things we've also started doing, as I said, we started including identifiers that would be relevant, especially starting with the social sciences. And one of the most exciting developments we've made is that we've included TK labels, traditional knowledge markers, to help identify the ownership and the protocols of indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage. This is very important for those who are in the social sciences because now it is assigned a PID. It's also assigned a PID, and you can have the final record on display within the DOCiD. What does that mean? When you look at any DOCiD and you see cultural heritage or indigenous knowledge, you'll see how it has been allowed to be shared or the degree of ownership of the community surrounding that indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage. Now, TK labels are becoming very important, especially in the field of social sciences, because of the issue pertaining to provenance. And yes, pertaining to the issue of provenance. And TK labels are now increasingly being used in museums and also cultural heritage institutions as well. So putting this as part of the assignment is really important. So it gives somebody a quick information on the type of on how they can actually use the cultural heritage or indigenous knowledge collection before sharing it. So what have we successfully integrated? What persistent identifiers have we successfully integrated within DOCiD? So you remember when I said that a given institution has multiple repositories or has multiple communities within one repository? What we realize is that this fragmentation makes it a bit difficult for librarians to search for information or connect primary collections with the research outputs that came out of it. So the DOCiD has so far has 6 resource types. These are, and we can add as many resource types as possible. And those resource types are assigned the primary DOCiD. Then, out of that, every single research output that came out of those primary collections are connected to the DOCiD. So let me give you context. When a librarian, when you as a researcher use a collection, or let's say a special collection from your library, it is actually the librarian who struggles to follow up in getting the research output that came out of that collection. Either they will email you or they will be coursing through the internet to try and get those collections, whether it was published or not. So it is the librarian who is struggling to do that. So there is no way they can actually connect any research output with the collection. So the DOCiD has come to solve that. So once a researcher is assigned a DOCiD, all they need to do is fill in their respective collections and assign their respective persistent identifiers based on whether the university has subscribed to it or not. So in the case of publications, you can have different types of publications, as you can see there. And if your institution has subscribed to Crossref, well and good. You can assign, if the work was published, you can pull in the Crossref ID. If not, you can use a handle. You can either use the Africa PID Alliance handle, which is different from the DOCiD, or you can use your institutional DOCiD. You can use the institutional handle. When it comes to document types, this is now where we go, for lack of better words, we go wild. You can have data sets, to images, to videos, to audios, you name it, to posters, scientific posters, whatever documents you'd like to add. Thesis, any secondary output is included here. So this is now where we put in the respective persistent identifier. Could be a handle, it could be Crossref, DataCite, an ARC key, CSTR if you're working in partnership with the Chinese Academy of Sciences or any government, any Chinese partner. So we've tried to make it as globally accessible as possible so that the documents are given equal measure of importance as the publications as well. Then the creators who are involved. So you will be doing your research. Again, as I said, it is the librarian who has to do the hard work of trying to find out who are the people involved. And if you put it on your scientific paper, it's such odious work. So within the DOCiD, as you're preparing, as you're filling in the information within your DOCiD, you're supposed to put in the creators. And with the creators, it automatically authenticates their ORCID identification. So you put in their name, and then the ORCID ID will come in, and their institution and their ORCID ID comes in. But then we went a step further because we realized that researchers not always work with researchers do not always work with fellow researchers. They might be working with community elders or community leaders, and they will use their national ID cards. They are not going to use their ORCID ID. So you can also include the national ID card. Depending on the country, that can be authenticated. Now, for the purpose of data security, we don't showcase the national ID card on the front face of the DOCiD. So though you can see it in the metadata, but you can't see it on the front face as well. So when you're looking at provenance, you have a situation whereby you have proper contribution from researchers and non-researchers to the work as well. And this is very crucial when it comes to indigenous knowledge. So now, when you're looking at the organizations that were involved in the research, of course, there's the raw ID that you are familiar with. That gives the universal view of the institution. But then we've tried to make it as granular as possible. Again, thinking with the lens of the librarian. It is the same librarian who will be tasked in finding out what is the research output coming out of a department. How do they get this information? Again, it's an odious task. So using the Ringgold persistent identifier, we are able to pull in research output as per the faculty or the school. So it goes down or department. Now, what does that mean for you as a researcher? When you're filling in this information for DOCiD, you'll put obviously the name of the organization, and then there'll be a drop down for you to put in the department, and the Ringgold just pulls in automatically. For the way DOCiD works is pretty much point and click, point and click. And then if you've published, you can just put in the ISNI ID. That again, it's point and click. Put in the name of the institution and the ISNI will come in. If you've published, this will pick up immediately. Now with RRIDs, in the event, you use a shared facility. I'll explain. So you're working within your university and you realize your laboratory doesn't have enough equipment to support your research, and you end up using a shared facility. Let's say University of Cape Town. If you're in East Africa, maybe University of Rwanda has a shared facility on what do you call this? On AI, depending on the research you're doing. Or if you're in West Africa, there are quite a number of universities that have shared facilities. We know them mostly as African Centers of Excellence, the World Bank African Centers of Excellence. Ideally, what they really are is that they are shared facilities. So we also give recognition to those institutions where you would share their facility, use their facilities and not necessarily use yours. Most of them are assigned RRIDs. Now, these institutions that have shared facilities are not legal entities, but they sit within legal entities. So that's why you find the World Bank Center of Excellence of X kind of research area within the University of X. So the recognition is given to the shared facility and it's assigned an RRID. And you may wonder, who is using RRIDs? RRIDs is literally being used by anyone and everyone who is using shared facilities. What we realized, and this is one of the reasons why we really love the project that we are working on, is that as much as we are showing you this plethora of PIDs, African representation was low. So we also went a step ahead to make sure that we had more African institutions represented in ROA, in Ringgold, in RRID, so that you can have better representation when using it. You will find other institutions, but you won't find ours. Then, of course, with the funders, you can find the funders who via ROA ID. Now, how does this, and also with the projects, you can also use the RRID ID. Now, how does this connect back to the DOCID? Remember I told you the DOCID is assigned to a primary collection. Now, can you imagine now as a librarian, when I send her a completely assigned DOCID, she will automatically see all the publications that came out of the collection, all the document types with the respective identifiers, the people involved, okay, researchers and non-researchers with their respective identifiers, the organizations involved, the institution that you are in, and also your partner institutions, complete with their respective Ringgold or ROA, ISNI, or RRIDs. The funders were involved, and also if there was a RRID assigned to if there was a project, it was a funded project, or if there was a project that was assigned a RRID ID, you'll also see that. All this is assigned within one ecosystem, and that DOCID is a persistent identifier. This is such rich metadata that covers both primary and secondary data as well. Now, we went a step further because we realized that this is just not only an institutional problem, it's also an individual problem. So we created two instances, one for individuals and one for institutions. In the subsequent slides, I'll show you how the ones for individuals works. But the reason why we created this is because, especially for those researchers who are in indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage, we noticed that they keep their collections on their hard drives or clouds. And again, they want to share those collections and the research output that they have. So now we're in a situation where we are getting quite a number of researchers using the DOCID as their storage, where they as their storage, because first of all, the DOCID, as I said, is a handle, so it can be cited. So they can put in their collections, and then attached to those collections are every single research output that came out of it as well. Now, how does DOCID work as an intermediary? I'd mentioned earlier that the average university has multiple repositories or multiple communities within their repositories, and it's not easy to track or streamline all that information in one space. So DOCID comes in as an intermediary, connecting the repositories, while especially when you're looking at indigenous knowledge, while preserving the indigenous knowledge and at the same time tracking impact. So now let's look at the left-hand side of the screen. You'll find that the average university has either a library repository with the books, ebooks, theses, and dissertations. It has a research data repository. It has an archival repository, indigenous knowledge collection, or specialized repositories. How do you connect any of this with the research output? Because you'll find that they'll have separate research repositories just for the research output. So within DOCID, all it does is that it is right in the middle, and you can pull in publications, you can connect publications, research data, knowledge translation, that is policy briefs, community reports, educational materials, and also indigenous knowledge recognition, as I'd shared with you, the cultural protocols, attributions, records, and community benefits with the TK labels, and the researchers' profiles in one ecosystem. So it just sits literally right in the middle. So it makes the librarians' work much, much easier. And the best part is that the fact that the DOCID is a persistent identifier, once you highlight that DOCID link on any of the databases that pull in handles, you get in all this rich metadata that is connected to each other. Complete. And when I say it's rich metadata, depending on how you want it, you can have the title and abstract, or sometimes the title and the actual document itself, or the video or the audio as well. Now, when it comes to researchers, you remember I said that we noticed that researchers were putting in information also on their hard drives. They could not, and they want to share those collections with also their research output. So what we are looking at is that the researcher is able to initiate their research. They're able to initiate their research with indigenous knowledge communities. It is also able to help them build a community partnership, because you can connect the collection with the research output. You can also see the community and consent and ethics approval that the researchers had to go through. And all this can be submitted within DOCiD. And at the same time, you can connect the publications, their data sets, their digital archives, the educational resources, their policy briefs, and any future research that they are planning to work on, just connected to the actual collection. So you can have as many DOCiDs as possible. You can have as many, as long as it reports to one resource type. And the resource type could be collection that you're working on. And then you can have your research outputs coming out of it. Now, while we were presenting this, we found out, actually, it was the publishers who came to us and they said, look, we need to look beyond the article. And they acknowledge that when researchers send them manuscripts, they give them a data dump of information. And they just either put it in a repository, whether it is DSpace or Figshare. And they realized, how do we connect all this information to the manuscript? So again, what we are doing is that with the DOCiD, the resource type now becomes the manuscript. And one of the outputs that come out of the manuscript is the publication. So as you're going through your back and forth with the reviewer, you can put in all your protocols, your data sets, your softwares, your supplementary materials, your peer review reports, if you want to, provenance and metadata in all the elements in these bits. You can put all of them in the document section. So you can have all your protocols, your data sets. You can have all of them assigned to their respective persistent identifiers. Remember, you're still going through your back and forth with the editor. So the article will be the last one, the last bit to be put in the DOCiD. But remember, the resource type will be a manuscript. You can put in all the creators. And this is very crucial because the person who is going to be handling this is the corresponding author. It is the corresponding author who has to go through all the authors to get all their IDs, their ORCID IDs, to make sure that all the raw IDs are correct and their institutions information is correct. So it is the corresponding author who will be filling in all this entire ecosystem all the way to the project as they are going through the back and forth on the review process. Because once that is completed, you can add the article and you end up having this ecosystem. And this ecosystem is where you have all your extra information, signed their respective persistent identifiers, complete with the contributor roles. And also it helps at the end of the day, it will be able to manage and enrich the entire ecosystem because you're able to validate the links, enrich the metadata. You can have version and track changes, rights and licensing. And then at the same time, what DOCiD does at the end of the day is persistent identification, bundles and links of all components complete with their respective identifiers. You end up having structured metadata and provenance and versioning and integrity. And it is a citable digital object. At the end of the day, it's a citable digital object. Now, what does this mean for publishers? For publishers, they'll have robust metadata workflows and automation. They'll have clear links between content and contributors, stronger attribution and credit, compliance with funder and policy mandates, supports for reproducibility and research integrity, and it also enables machine readability and analytics. And most importantly, it provides new opportunities for innovating publishing models. So what we're saying is that instead of giving a data dump to the publisher, we are now tearing apart and looking at beyond the article. So the manuscript has been submitted, but then there'll be all this extra information that is put within the DOCiD and assigned its respective identifiers. Now, our infrastructure development is that we are live. DOCiD has also been recognized as a fair digital object, and the Africa PID Alliance, where we sit, is now a member of the DOI Foundation. As I said, we are not competing with the existing ecosystem persistent identifiers. We are just complementing them. They are linear in nature, meaning they can only assign to an object. The persistent identifier can be assigned to an object. We can assign to multiple objects as long as it reports to one particular resource type. So you need a resource type, and then you have the multiple objects that report to it. So one of the developments that we are making right now is that we are connecting DOCiD with various open science platforms. I am happy and proud to say we are officially been indexed, and you can track our citation through Google Scholar. These are developments we started recently, so this will start picking up from what we got the message from Google Scholar from September. So it means the cycle is complete. It's just not an issue of creating a persistent identifier. It's about making a persistent identifier much more accessible and open, making research that was ideally not accessible much more open, making secondary literature much more accessible as well. So why is DOCiD important? We need a world with accessible scholarly data infrastructures. Okay. So as much as we're dreaming big, the biggest problem was the affordability issues when it comes to infrastructure. And that's why we had to build on existing open infrastructure. And we have a lot of great literature in Africa, which is not accessible. So DOCiD will be able to solve this. So the solution that DOCiD is doing is a hybrid digital object identification, linking local handles with DOIs or globally renowned persistent identifiers. So we have proposed a multilinear data model for patents, indigenous knowledge, cultural heritage, and biomedical samples. So how does DOCiD improve streamlined access? Number one, you have improved citations and attribution. Providing a single container ID, persistent identifier for a collection of related content improves the citation and attribution process. Researchers can cite the entire container, ensuring proper credit for the entire body of work. Okay, so you don't end up just citing just the research output. You end up citing the entire container, and everything that was involved in that entire process is also recognized as well, both primary and gray literature. This approach promotes transparency and recognition for contributors across different types of scholarly outputs. It also helps in improving efficient metadata management, and for a group of related resources because you'll find managing metadata for a group of related resources becomes more efficient with one container ID as well. So we are looking at improved data enhanced data integration. When you're able to integrate articles, datasets, and resources within a digital container, can facilitate interoperability, enabling better integration of data and findings from different sources. Researchers can explore relationships between different types of data, leading to more comprehensive insights. And this approach promotes transparency and recognition for contributors across different types of scholarly outputs. Now, with that said, let's look at this from a governance perspective. What is the roadmap on PIDs in Africa? So far, we do not have a strategy. We do not have a continental strategy. I recognize that there are stakeholders who are trying to create PIDs. There's WACREN with the ARC keys that are trying to create PIDs, and now there's us with the Africa PID Alliance with the DOCiD. But as it stands, we have no strategy in Africa. Though there is a roadmap for implementing PIDs in Africa, there is a need for us to have a continental conversation to have a strategy so that we can improve the production of locally produced PIDs. And it's just not an issue of producing PIDs, it's to make these PIDs much more accessible. It's one thing to produce PIDs, but these PIDs have to be accessible within the global ecosystem. We need to see them in citation databases, we need to see them in bibliographic databases so that we can make our work as fair as possible, just like what we are trying to do with the DOCiD. What are our observations so far? There's lack of or poor data management in universities. There's lack of digitization of outputs in arts and humanities and social sciences. It's quite low. It needs to improve. There's a need to connect the dots on the outputs on the research lifecycle as I've shared, because what DOCiD is able to do, it is able to support the following departments within a university. When you critically look at it, it's you're looking at in a Department of Social Sciences or Arts and Humanities, Institutes of Cultural Heritage, whether it is Institute of African or Asian Studies. It can connect Deputy Vice Chancellor's Research Office, Grants Office, herbariums, where you have the special collections or technical transfer offices, all within one ecosystem, and the primary library as well. You can find it all within one ecosystem. Now, as I said, we the DOCiD is part of the Africa PID Alliance program, and this is a program that we had given ourselves 9 years to create and fully make sustainable. Project started in 2023, and phase 1 was complete is actually complete in 2026, and the objective was to set up the project, create strategic partnership, and set up a prototype and infrastructure, which is all done. Also with the help of our partners. Now we are in phase 2, as you can see, and we are extending the services, looking at how we can maintain our registry and having more use cases to show how it is going to be sustainable, and how it can be more use cases to make it more relevant and sustainable to the community. Phase 3 will be 2029 to 2032, and there we are looking at having a fully fledged registration agency and providing a service of African content via the PIDs and a resolution of DOIs. That will be long term, but then most importantly is African registration of as an African registration provider of African content via our PIDs. Though it is starting, we can see this as a future where that is possible because we have these amazing partners who've helped us launch the project and who have been committed to working with us. So who uses DOCiD? So researchers, as I've mentioned, the person who should use it is the researcher, the librarian, the museum collection manager or curator, the DVC research, the patent or examination officer, and also PID providers can use it. Now, we are going through our product development, and these are the use cases we are literally working with. As you can see, we have the publisher, SAF, we have museums, you have Rhodes University, this is just a select number of institutions. So we have University of Lagos, we have the Ngorongoro Museum, excuse me, and the list goes on. So these are some of the active use cases we are working with with the DOCiD. Now, we are in line with the Continental Agenda 2063, particularly aspiration 1, 5, and 7. But within those aspirations, it is what we are looking at, especially in aspiration 1. Our goal, especially on goal 2, we want to have well-educated citizens and skills revolution underpinned by science, technology, and innovation. And when it comes to aspiration 5 on goal 10, we are looking at using world-class infrastructure crisscrossing across the continent. So we are well aligned within our Africa's Agenda 2063. And for us, my take-home message is that it's time Africa be sat on the forefront when it comes to, I want to use the right words, when it comes to infrastructure development, when it comes to research infrastructure development. Don't get me wrong. It is important. It will be ignorant to ignore the existing infrastructural ecosystems, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that we have been left behind because they do not really support our challenges. We have a lot of great literature that is not accessible. We have, and when we were setting up Africa PID Alliance project, the first thing we were told that it would be expensive. And what we did is that we just leverage on existing open infrastructure. So we need to start showing the world that as a continent, we are able to not only produce infrastructure, but infrastructure that meets international governance standards. We also need to sit at the forefront in making sure that we are responsible in making our work accessible. And there's so much that the existing infrastructure can do. I'm not saying they are not doing well, they're doing a good job, but there's so much they can do. So we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to make our work much more visible? Not compete with them, work in collaboration with them, and make sure that we have a seat at the table when it comes to infrastructure development and open science adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joy, for that insightful presentation and quite passionate presentation, I should say. really, it's a great pleasure to know and understand and learn of what TCC is doing to ensure that we have a connected research infrastructure. And you've made it very clear that it's not simply something of a technical matter, but it directly affects the visibility and trustworthiness of our and reuse of our African scholarship. So we don't have any questions in the chat so far, but I would like to open it up to the audience to ask any questions that you may have. Feel free to voice over your question or type it in the chat or the Q&A widget so that we can have Joy respond to those questions.
I had seen a hand was up. There's an attendee whose hand was up. Wallace Lungu.
Yes. Yes. 1 second. Go ahead, Wallace.
Are you audible?
Yes.
All right. So I wanted to understand on the digital repository, you said we can use one system. I think in the beginning, if I heard you properly. So you said, for example, maybe an organization like maybe ours, we have maybe data. We have data maybe from various departments. So if we have maybe systems from maybe finance, or maybe we have the another system, maybe from, for example, LSTM as a department. Now we want to.
Did we lose you, Wallace?
I think I got context on what he was trying to say. He was connecting it with finance and other systems. Wallace?
Yes. Am I? Did I put my question in order? Maybe I was not clear.
No, it wasn't very clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying, for example, an organization like ours, we have several departments. We have almost maybe 4 departments. They have their own system. Now you said that you can merge all those systems into one, maybe like a digital repository. So is it, how can we do it, like to merge all these systems in the first beginning of the presentation? I think you said so, something like that.
Okay. So now the system, it connects to the various repositories within the university. So it's strictly for the repositories. Yes. So if you have multiple communities, you've got multiple repositories, and you want to connect the primary information with the research output that came out of it. This is the system to work with. Because ideally, what is happening right now is that you cannot connect the two. If you want to get the research output that came out of any collection, any indigenous collection, you have to go to that collection itself, or go to the link where the repository where that output is. But you can't find it in one place. You can't connect it into one ecosystem, which is becoming more important, especially for librarians, if they want to see the degree to which research output has come out of their respective collections. They want to see, okay, in this private collection of X, how much funding came out of that? How much research output came out of it? this is what can sort that out. And it comes in very handy for those who are in social sciences and arts and humanities. That has been their one biggest problem. I hope that answers your question.
Well, are you comfortable with that? Do you have a follow-up question? Well, given the fact that we'll have a recording at the end of this, you can follow up and perhaps listen to the answer again and write us an email or a follow-up question to Joy, and we'll surely pass it over to. And
look at this.
All right, so the floor is still open. We still have time for questions. Feel free to type the questions in the chat or raise your hand so you can voice over your question.
And
thank you, Mr. David. Yes.
Yeah, there's a comment about hosting more webinars. We normally do host webinars for the Africa PID Alliance. So you can get let me just share with you the link on the can I share that revelation on the group in the meeting room?
Yes, I'm sure you can do that.
Okay, so you can join the community and you can have access to our upcoming webinars right now, and it shouldn't be an issue per se on the next one. So we have one with the World Academy of Sciences, so you should be able to join that and access that as well. So I've put that in the WhatsApp so you can join the community and have access to it as well. And I've just got a comment, a revelation. Some people are not able to join the meeting. I think there's something with the link.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we will share the recording once this is done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for context, I'm going to share a link to the where the recording will be hosted. And so if there's anyone who missed the session, they can as well forward them the link. They can watch that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other question? So that's the link to the UbuntuNet TV, where you can get all the recordings. And please do follow us on LinkedIn, where you can get instant updates on what's the next webinar in the IOI webinar series. Well, if there is no question, I would like to thank you so much, Joy, and our participants, as well as the two organizations, UbuntuNet Alliance and TCC rather. And most importantly, thank you once again, Joy, for sharing your expertise and for helping us understand both the strategic importance and practical possibilities of DOCiD and the whole persistent identifier infrastructure. And thank you to everyone once again who joined us and contributed to questions. We encourage you to explore OPAR and join the OPAR community of practice. And on behalf of the UbuntuNet Alliance, thank you everyone, and bye for now.